Welcome to this session by EEX Japan. I know these times are quite exciting, but today we're going to have a look at the future of the power market. And we've got a very nice and chatty group together today. I'll very briefly introduce myself and then everybody else. I am Henning Gloystein. I work with EEX Group based in Singapore, and I am in charge of energy, climate, and resources. We have together here on this panel today Bob Takai, who is executive advisor at EEX in Japan. Ms. Julie Arnold, who is an energy consultant and a former power and cross-commodity trader of more than 20 years experience across the world. We have Mr. Ryo Nosawa, who is a co-founder and CEO of the brokerage AnyChain and a former LNG and power trader. With him also Mr. Tom Roberts, a co-founder and CEO of the brokerage Araco, who has a lot of experience in entering power markets, especially in Europe, but is also looking at Japan now. And last but not least, we have Mr. Tobias Lausch, who is head of commodity derivatives for Asia Pacific at French bank BNP Paribas, based actually here in Singapore with me. As I said, these have been very exciting times, but more generally speaking, Japan is seen as probably the new power market with the biggest potential in the world. Which is fantastic, and that's probably why EEX is going into this market. But as also these past weeks have seen, markets can get a bit tricky and feisty at times, and every market has space for improvement, especially the new ones. So I will make a first round with everybody here to make Japan's power market more of a success. Maybe I'll go around you all very briefly. Can you please, one by one, give us one or two thoughts and aspects of what you think could be introduced in the market in Japan in the next months or years to make it better. So I will start off with the host, Takai-san, Bob from EEX, please.
Well, thank you, Henning. Thank you. And to me, the whole market turmoil that we are seeing this time is a wake-up call to the emerging power market in Japan. And there are many lessons to be learned from this hiccup that we have right now. And to me, there are two factors. One is an external factor. The other one is an internal factor causing the turmoil. The first factor, external turmoil, is the biggest reason is the illiquidity of the spot LNG market. This is not purely, inherent to the power market. So we need to discuss the LNG market per se. And the internal factor, which I would like to stress this time, is perhaps twofold. One is too much dependence on the JPX market for procurement for the PPS traders. And the second one is a lack of risk management mechanism on the part of the PPS. And this time, I'd like to talk a little bit about the internal factor. And there are two things there. One is a JPX, and also the other one is a risk management. First of all, the GPX. The JPX price has been structurally too low for a long time. And this is because there is a rule in Japan that the power generators must supply the power to the market at the marginal cost. And at the marginal cost, there is very little profit on the part of supplier. And also, there is another factor which is causing this problem at the moment. That is too much dependence on the JPX market on the part of the PPS for the procurement because the price has been so low. And just a few days ago, the METI has put the cap on the market. But this doesn't come to the problem, the low price of the JPX. So I think this issue is going to be the issue that we have to tackle going forward. And the number two, that is a lack of a risk management mechanism on the part of PPS. And essence of this problem at the moment is a long-term sales with the short-term purchase, the mismatch of the period in the purchase, the style of the purchase of the PPS. And also there is a liquidity risk of the physical power at the moment when they buy the power from the JPX. And I think in order to tackle this issue, the PPS must visualize and also quantify the price risk exposure of their own company And also they have to manage the risk within their own financial strengths. And this is absolutely necessary. And I think there are three, solutions to that. One is they have to go to the market and cover their short position by matching the period as well as the quantity. And also they can use JEPX market for procurement. But if that's the case, they must use the futures market to cover their price exposure. So if they use the JEPX market for the liquidity, well, for the purchase of the physical power, liquidity risk is still there. But they have to manage that risk by minimizing the portion of their purchase from the JEPX market. So there are, many issues that we are going to discuss today, but this is just a little ice-breaking thoughts from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. I will pass right on to Julie, because I know you've got experience in Australia, Europe, all over the world, as far as I know. So what comes to your mind when you look at Japan's power market future?
I think that Japan, they're in such a great position, actually. They might not feel it now with the price spikes, but having had deregulation in Europe over 20 years ago and Australia, and deregulated markets in the US, Japan is in such a good position that they can look at the mistakes that countries have made in other parts of the world and cherry pick the best parts of each of those markets. And just relating back to what Bob was saying about hedging, so it's come at a timely point that the EEX futures have been launched, because that's a product that enables companies within Japan to risk manage. And this issue we've had recently is really highlighting that there is a reason to hedge forwards. And I think there's a misconception sometimes within Japan that using futures is a risky thing to do because it's speculation, but actually it's the less risky thing to do if you hedge. I'd say another thing that I'd like to see going forward, and this is probably moving even more forward, is that one of the good things that we have in Europe and in other parts of the world is the concept of publishing data in a timely basis. And think what this leads to is you've got the community of international traders that really want to join the Japanese market and provide much needed liquidity into the market, which enables the Japanese companies to have that possibility of hedging. And traders need to be encouraged into the market. And the only way that more traders will be involved is if the rules are fair. So in Europe, we had this back when we deregulated over here. At the time, the generators in Europe didn't want to publish information about their power plants and what was happening physically in the market. And that was enforced on the Europeans by the government. Actually, when they got used to doing that, they found that it was a good thing to do, and it made a level playing field for everyone in the market to receive information about what was happening with physical assets all at the same time. And we have a regulation over here called REMIT, which prevents insider trading. And what that means is that if you own a physical asset and there's a problem with it or an issue with it, that company must publish that information straight away to the whole market. Say, for example, I've got a gas-fired power station, it's broke down. I must publish that information immediately before making any trades in the market. And having that in place prevents market manipulation and insider trading. So I'd like to see these sorts of things be discussed in Japan and potentially implemented. That's been a good thing in Europe.
Thank you, Julie. Data transparency, regulation, and cherry picking from experience from others. Those good points, I find. I'll go back now to Nosawa-san. Rio, you've traded LNG and power in the United States, I believe, as well, but you are from Japan, and as a broker, you bring together buyers and sellers. What are your thoughts on what would you like to see, and what's so promising in Japan?
Okay, so this time spike identified a bunch of issues to be addressed in the future. Well, I want to emphasize the importance of the market design process in the future. So I felt that when thinking about the Japanese market, I think we should maybe take into consideration Japanese market's distinctiveness and immatureness maybe. In terms of distinctiveness, as you are aware, Japan is an isolated country. So we are not connected to continental pipelines. So when we got if the price started coming up, we still need to import LNG. So the spike period tends to be prolonged. That is very distinctive, I think. And in terms of immatureness, I think we should not forget that we deregulated the market only 5 years ago. So still market participants are in the learning process. So taking into consideration these things, I personally think we should think about introducing some measures which will cushion this extremely volatile market. So yeah, I traded power in Houston, but even Upward, which is most iconic energy-only market in the world, has gradually introduced or increased the price cap actually. So maybe we should think about like as Takai-san mentioned, maybe decided to introduce imbalance cap as a temporary measure at 200 yen per kilowatt hour, but maybe structurally we should discuss the introduction or actually lowering in the price cap, the current price cap of 990 yen per kilowatt hour to some like a reasonable level. But I do want to emphasize that we need to discuss very carefully and thoroughly this type of thing, because there are many stakeholders. So it takes time, but in the future we should like think about those market design. Yeah, that's my thought.
It'd be good to have some good discussions within the market about the price cap issue that Rio talked about actually, because it's still important with a price cap that the market price does reflect supply and demand properly. So I think a price cap can be good, but depending on the level of the price cap and how it gets implemented. So I think Rio's right that it needs to be an open discussion about that to see what's going to work best.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you. But you know, price cap. You also the isolation of Japan. I mean, you know, take for comparison's sake, Germany, where I'm originally from, which has 9 land borders, which makes things a lot easier if you've got too much or too little electricity in the system. So those things to keep in mind. I'll just want to ask Tom as well. You've built up quite a few markets in Europe, from what I know. So what do you recommend? What gets you excited in Japan, and you know, why are you getting into it? But what's not working yet?
You flatter me, Henning. Thank you very much. Well, so for me, it's all about counterparties. As a broker, the more counterparties that we have, the easier it is for us to broker, and the more liquidity there is. I would say that so far, I think EEX has done a fantastic job of enabling this market in a quick and timely fashion, so much so that it's meant that we can really benefit from doing trades with companies that are based in Europe versus companies that are based in Japan. I mean, that's really cool, right? So for me, it's getting an understanding. For me, when I'm talking to clients, I think getting an understanding of market data and how the market operates, and understanding those things, and and backing up exactly what Julie was saying. You know, probably less on the regulatory side, but more on the understanding of how the market works. You know, you've got all these stakeholders globally that are looking at this market, as you said, Henning, absolutely fantastic market, huge growth potential. But people are going, okay, now how do I tackle this beast? And so, yeah, I think data. I think, you know, data is a key, and I think that will enable us to be able to get more counterparties on board. And from my perspective, what I would like is more counterparties. Yeah, I think working towards that to bring a bit more transparency and a bit more understanding is probably the key. But like I say, the benefit to EEX is that it's very easy for all of these power companies that have already got, you know, experienced trading departments and risk management departments and etc. to be able to get involved just by porting the membership over. So I think we really are at an inflection point where it's going to be, you know, a huge growth this year.
Thanks, Tom. That's a fascinating day for huge growth. Tobias, I know banks are key in getting growth going in power markets and getting liquidity going. What do you reckon? Why is BNP Paribas? Why are you interested in the Japanese power market? And after that, let's get into the open discussion.
Yeah, I mean, I can mirror what Tom just said. Obviously, we're interested because, and what Julie said, it's a fantastic market, great opportunities. It's new, and it's one of the few growth markets that we see in APAC that is going into this stage. But I wanted to just point out to Julie's point on the regulatory framework, because I think that there's two maybe other aspects that from a bank perspective might be also important to point out. So obviously, you know, the increase in participation, increase in liquidity, and the establishment of a larger wholesale market. I would say that there needs to be a stronger integration of the spot and future markets through encouragement or allowing banks to participate in the spot market and in the physical market. I think that's important to encourage banks to financialize products that they can sell to their clients in Japan, and also to the point that, you know, we need to have more Japanese banks participation. I think that's key, and for them to more easily you know, access the OTC commodity derivatives market and also the exchanges. Potentially, I mean, concretely, I would say that you know, the securities companies should be allowed to operate as a broker and as a trader on exchanges, and I think there's some regulatory harmonization that really needs to be done from my aspect, and you know, and that financialization of the products and the encouragement of the banks that these inherent, let's say, regulatory and licensing issues that are at the moment in the market, they need to be broken down so that the banks locally can offer more products to their clients.
Thank you, Tobias. A lot of things were mentioned here. I guess we can open it up, but one thing I'm going to throw in there, and then maybe you all discuss, perhaps not all at once, but so we've heard potential price caps in power markets, especially one where renewables are going to be added a lot. There is also the option of negative power prices. Does anyone have any thought on this? I'll start, Julie, because I know you have some thoughts on
Yeah, that's one of my favourite topics, negative prices, actually. A lot of people in the market are probably fed up of hearing me talking about it. And it actually links really nicely. I was going to interrupt Tobias because it links really nicely with what he was saying about having more people, banks participating in the JEPX market. I think that's probably a step that might happen further down the line. We're probably not quite ready for that yet, but to enable that to happen, we need to eliminate the basis risk between the JEPX physical spot price and the futures financial price. And one of the ways we would need to do that is to allow for negative prices, and negative prices happen on a regular basis, more and more, especially now with a lot more renewable energy online. We get negative prices in Europe all the time and have for many years. Australia has very many negative prices, and it's a price indicator that sends a signal to the market of what the market needs to do. So when the market is oversupplied, you need to have the negative prices in order to pay generation to switch off. And that would be an intermediary stage, having that to allowing then more people to enter the JEPX market.
Thank you, Julie. Anyone else got any thoughts? Please, Leo.
I have a question. So if you decide to like introduce negative prices, but still you maintain area prices, or you decided to like go with nodal prices, my understanding is if you want to introduce negative prices, that is only the one purpose is like to give a price signals, right signals for kind of renewable developers to make a right investment decision. So yeah, we need to like decrease the transmission investment cost, right? So that price signal should be given by or shown by like nodal basis. That's my understanding. In our court, like they decided to transform the entire system from area prices to the nodal system. So that was a very huge step. But in European countries, do you still maintain area prices with negative prices? That's my question.
So by area prices, do you mean prices, different prices in each country, for example, like how you have a different price in each region of Japan? You would still
region.
Yeah, you'd still maintain the separate regional prices, and in fact, a negative price in one region which joins another region is a signal to say that that region needs to be exporting the power. The region with the lowest price always exports to the higher price region in a physical matter that's working, you know, if it's functioning properly. And so yeah, you would definitely keep the regional prices. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, sometimes like a TSO want to like understand the price difference by each transmission line, and which is kind of introduced in the United States. So I just want to learn about the European market. Yeah.
Bob, I saw you wanted to say something a bit earlier.
There are 2 points that I would like to mention. The first point is the bank's participation in the power market. I think it is possible for the Japanese banks to participate as a clearing member of the futures exchange like EEX. But actually, when it comes to the physical commodities, there is a regulation in Japan that the banks and the financial companies have a limit to participate in the physical market. And so that's the first point. And also second point is a minus pricing that you guys are now discussing. Actually, on the 19th of January last week, there was a committee held in METI to discuss raising the marginal cost, which is actually a rule to supply the power to the JPX market. So at the moment, the discussion in Japan is not going to the minus pricing, but also raising the floor price, so that the power generators do not lose money by doing so, and also to alleviate too much dependence on the PPS companies to the JPX market at the moment.
Well, so how big of an issue is, we've got people from Japan here and from around the world. How big is the issue of language barrier, and what can be done about this?
Should I take that one? I think
yes, Tom, you have first.
So the way that brokers work in Europe is we deal partially on screen, we deal partially on voice. And one of the things that we've discovered and we're learning is the different ways in communicating in Japanese are very different to the ways that you would communicate in English. When you're communicating on voice, there's a lot of nuance in the words that you're using to imply or to achieve what you want to achieve. So we're finding it really interesting going through this process of understanding. But yeah, from our perspective, and from Mariko's perspective, we focus on the client and on the language that the clients speak. You know, we sit in the middle of the market, so we need to be a conduit between all these different players. So for us, being able to speak, having Japanese language speakers, I think is really important for us, and I think that really helps with the market. I'm sure, Ria, you totally agree. It's important that, you know, if you're a trader, Julie and Ria, you can be a testament. Bob, you can be a testament to this. Obviously, you've got a lot of stuff going on. The last thing you need to do is have to translate from Japanese to English so that you can get your trade done, right? So I think that is a key. And I think EEX has done a really good job. I get these emails in Japanese. I have no idea what they say, but with the English at the bottom as well. And you know, I think that's the key. You know, we shouldn't be pushing our English onto this market. I think we should be coming as the as the ones learning the local cultures and the local nuances as to how to deal. And that's certainly something that we're trying to do at the moment.
I think as companies, though, on the other hand, setting up new trading businesses to enter the Japanese market, which I had the issue when I started looking at Japan, that was in 2015. There was nobody that you could ask in those days that spoke English. You know, international companies, there was no one to ask outside of Japan for help with how things work, and everything was published in Japanese. I don't actually like complaining about that, because if I was a Japanese person in Japan and the English person came along and said, why don't you publish things in English? I would think, well, it's not my responsibility. I think you could get a balance. It makes it easier if you can get information in English. If METI published things in English, and they do publish things in English, but there's often a delay. But these days, it's actually not too difficult to translate with the technology we've got with Google Translate. So I'm actually getting quite good at that, and managing to translate that way. I think it would be helpful, but I don't think we can enforce that on the locals. It depends how much the Japanese want us in the market trading, want more liquidity to come in. So it'd be great if they could help us and do that, but we can't push that onto them.
Thank you. Tobias, one thing I'm going to throw at you, because it hasn't been mentioned yet, but I hope you can answer it. What about capacity markets? I know that's a bit of an issue in many markets, especially, again, renewables coming to the system. Japan has pump hydro system capacity. How important is that for a market, or is it even disruptive and you don't want it? How do you see that as a finance from bank?
Clearly, capacity markets are important, but they are just one component, right? So you need to start somewhere with the market. So for me, the focus should be developing the spot market, getting participation from various players, also on the financial side. Knowing that there are restrictions, but there's I think that there should be lobbying for changing those restrictions, to be honest. And I think capacity markets need to be built up in parallel. That's for sure. But yeah, the question is how many building sites can you manage at the same time? I think that has to come, but it might not be the absolute priority number one.
So you'd say things like negative pricing or the data transparency or change regulations for banks would be more important?
Key is participation, increased liquidity, education. Yeah, that's key, and I think that's where EEX and probably yourselves are doing a great job. I think that's key to spread the word, to make people understand what the possibilities in terms of pricing are out there. So I think that's really key, because otherwise everything else will be dependent on a functioning spot market and a functioning future market.
Thank you, Tobias. We're already almost at the end of our time, but I do want to give a last word to Bob and EEX as the hosts on this. I mean, we've heard a few things now, Bob, data transparency, different pricing mechanisms, liquidity of related markets like LNG. And as Tobias just said, there's a lot of things to fix, but also to be excited about. So what are your lasting thoughts for the future, please?
All right, thank you very much, Henning. And thank you all to participate in the discussion for the better future of the Japanese power market. And I think, we shouldn't be so pessimistic and negative about the market after the turbulence we are going through at the moment in Japan. And the Japanese are not the only one to experience a tough time in building the power market. The German, the British, and the French, Australians, and so forth have been through the turbulent time in the past, and to come out even more robust than before. So I think, this kind of candid exchange of views from a different types of businesses and different nationalities are most important to constantly make this market even better and stronger. So please do give us your thoughts and ideas even after this digital summit in order to build this market together. So back to you, Henning.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. I believe now we have time for some questions. So we will open it up live to the audience right now and take any questions. We've mentioned a lot of areas that can be fixed, have to be fixed, and that are exciting. So please go ahead.